Okay, my mic is working now. Wonderful. Okay, thank you. Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for joining our session today. This is my last session for this Cisco Live, so I'm excited and hopefully this will all go well. Until now, I did not have any special surprises. Let's see how it goes. Just before we begin, I would like to try an exercise with you. Try closing your eyes for a second and listen carefully. Okay, no, almost no one is closing their eyes. So let's start with this. The noise you're hearing from around here, I have no control over it. Please do not punish me in the survey for the background noise. That's one thing. Now, the second, while your eyes are closed, try to imagine the worst possible dashboard or user experience a system you ever worked with had. Think about closely what would be something you do not want to open up your eyes to in the morning. This is what I had in mind. Again, I had in the 90s, I remember older people having these kind of a mess in their browser. Not the best experience. Sometimes we have tools that were built by engineers and for engineers, and sometimes they tend to look and feel a bit too cumbersome. So with that, my name is Oren Brigg. I'm a product manager at Cisco Meraki, but I'm not going to talk about Meraki. One of the things that I think, or I hope, we do well at Meraki is provide a very easy user experience, a very clean environment, clean dashboard where you can manage things in a simple manner, where you can think about a lot about the user experience. But we understand not all tools are there yet. Some tools outside of Cisco, sometimes you have complex processes. You have tools that just have a lot of menus, and that's what we're going to talk about. So we'll start with the why. Why talk about user experience? Why does it matter? Hopefully, it's not complex, but maybe more about why some systems become very, very complex. Then we'll talk about the how. How can we simplify and make our lives easier when it comes to user experience? And the third one would be front end versus back end. We talk a lot here at DevNet Theater and at Cisco U about all kinds of scripts and all kinds of things we can do, mostly on the CLI part. We'll talk a bit about the backend. We'll get to a demo and talk a bit about the conclusions. So, starting with the why. The reason why some systems get complex is because we offer a lot of features. The demonstration and the example I'm going to give today is coming from one of the systems that are really close to my heart. It's Cisco ISE, our NAC solution. But Cisco ISE is far more than just being a NAC solution. Cisco ISE is used for device administration, what used to be secure ACS and TACACS. It's used for secure access, for guest access, for asset visibility, for Cisco SD access, content exchange, threat containment, bring your own device, segmentation, compliance, posture, and more. So when we have a lot of features in a certain product, there's a lot of different things we can configure. Now, not everyone are using all of the features, but for those who do, they needed to have it somewhere. And that's where we get a lot of configuration, a lot of different options we have to do. Now, what's the problem with that? The problem is we have the network engineer, the network architect. They know what they're doing. They know every single menu they need to know. They know how to read a manual. They know how to operate everything, even the most complex use cases. And they know what they're doing. But then on the other hand, we have the part-time student. We have the help desk. We have the people that don't necessarily have these years of knowledge and experience or the ability to read an entire paragraph from the start to the end, and they want to get things done. And when they see a lot of menus, they feel overwhelmed. They don't want to get there. So let's talk about the how. How can we make the life of the part-time student easier? Or maybe let's talk about why do we want to make their life easier? Think about, I hope, how many of you here consider yourself the expert in their field? Nice. How many of you experts have these mundane tasks that you would love for the help desk to take over, but they can't because it's slightly too complicated for them? Yeah, looks familiar. So the idea is, how can we help you as the experts move away that responsibility of some really, really basic stuff to other people, so you can free your own time to focus on the things that matter. So let's talk about the how. First of all, in order to do that, you need to gather the requirements. Talk with the people that you would like to offload your work with, or talk with yourselves. Understand what exactly are you doing, are things that you do that add value to the organization, and what are things that you're doing that just cost you some time, just cause you to click a button here and there and doing the same thing over and over again that you would love for someone else to do. Once you got all of these requirements, the second part would be, well, RDFM, which is for read the fabulous manuals, try understand how do we get there? What can we do? And this is where, because we're talking about APIs, these would mostly be the API references. So we want to understand, I want to get a certain task done. Which APIs can I invoke in order to get the information I need or to send the information I need to get it done? So in terms of ISE and any other Cisco solution, you can Google it, or you can go to developer.cisco.com and find a relevant API reference. So we go to the reference, we have a whole list of different APIs we can use, and then we're looking for their API that will provide us with the information we're looking for. And I'll be talking about a specific example in a moment. Once we found them, the next part would be experiment. I found the API, I found the documentation. Now I want to actually make sure that it's actually providing the information I expect it to provide. Now, the tool of choice for me would be Postman. With Postman, simply because it's very easy to get started with, and it's a simple UI where I can type in the API I'm looking for. I can see the result, or I can see the result. Not sure if at the bank you are able to. I can see the result and I can understand, am I seeing the piece of data that I'm looking for? What's the key and the value, and how do I need to parse my data in order to get to that information? So let's say I have a bit more of a complex flow. I'm taking one API, getting one piece of data from it, and then I take that, pass it on to the next API, take another piece from there, put it on the third API, get a piece from there. So I'm doing all this experimentation with Postman just to make sure I can get to the result I'm trying to. I do that because Postman is very easy to start with, and it's way easier than starting to write code. So I make sure I have the building blocks in place, and after all of that is done, only then I can start to code and actually write that logic of, I want to take this information from this API, take it, push it to that API, gets the result, push it to a third API. Now I know what do I need to write in code. Which coding language would I use? That completely depends on the coding language that I have experience with or they can work with. For me personally, Python is a way to go. For others, if you prefer Golang, JavaScript, whatever language, whatever you feel comfortable, that's fine, as long as you can make that API call and parse the data. So, backend versus frontend. This is the beginning of COVID days, where I needed to find some space at home, and I needed to be representable for my customers. But that was essentially half of the laundry room with some storage area in the back. But I was able to make it look all pretty. The same concept exactly goes into code. We can do in the back end all kind of messy things, while the front end, while the user is getting this all nice and pretty UI. So my problem was that I was able to write some Python and get the back end to work, but front end was not really my thing. And that's where collaboration used to help. I contacted a colleague of mine called Ramona, which she's a wizard when it comes to CSS and some front end. And she told me, hey, there's a thing called a Cisco UI kit, where the UI is already ready for you to use. You have all the components needed in CSS. All you need to do is just tailor them a bit, and you can create something that looks like a Cisco UI, or something that looks decent, way better than anything I could create on my own without those building blocks. So we worked on it together, and the way we decided to do it, I was writing the backend with Python using a Cisco tool called PySDS, which would invoke API calls towards ISE and towards catalyst switches. She was working on the front end that would be used by the part-time student, working with HTML and CSS and some JavaScript to make it all nice and pretty. So while I'm dealing with the messy stuff, I'm providing a JSON output to the front end that has a pretty representation of it for the user. So far, I hope it makes sense. Now, again, I'm going to emphasize the use case I'm talking about is about Cisco ISE. However, take any system that you'd like, whether it's Cisco or not, anything that has APIs or any connection to it, and you can apply the same concept to simplify that UI, simplify that workflows in order to, as you mentioned, offload those mundane tasks to someone else to handle. Let me show you what it looks like. In order to communicate properly between me and Ramona, I used the best graphic editing tool I have experience with, which is PowerPoint, in order to create, hey, it's a mock-up, it worked. I created some really low fidelity drawings, or again, PowerPoint slide, of what I expect the system to look like, the UI to look like. I wanted to have a four or five menu on the side. I wanted to have this table at some point. I mentioned which backend API call would get that data. So when she's helping me creating this, she knew which API call she needs to make against the backend to get that information. So this is one screen, this is another screen. Again, different table, different Python functions, and a third screen, and so on. So we played around with it, and we had some experimentation, and we got it to work. The end result is the following. We wanted to create, now one more thing before jumping to the demo, we wanted to create something very lean and very simple. ISE is a great tool, it's a great product, it's supported. We don't want to recreate all of that logic and I don't have the audacity to claim I know how to do things better than ISE. All I wanted to do is to create a very lean, very simple representation of the UI to make just a cleaner look, fewer functions, and that tailor the needs to the needs that my customer back then needed. And this is the result. First of all, we started with a login page because we didn't want anyone to just log in there. Now, about this login, worth mentioning, I don't have my own username and password. Think about it. So I'd have a user password for ISE, and then I have another one for vanilla ISE. The older people here would not understand the reference. And if we already have in our organization some kind of password management, strong password, all kind of policies, I don't want to recreate that. It doesn't make any sense. Having yet another username password, I need to then have it encrypted somewhere, security, I don't want that. So instead, what I did here, I'm getting these pieces of text, I'm crafting an API call using those. I assume they're okay. I'm sending those to ISE. If ISE returns any information, I said, okay, apparently it's okay. If ISE is not returning information, it's not okay. And that's how I'm not saving username and password. I don't do anything. I just assume it's okay. And if ISE tells me it's okay, apparently it's okay. So again, lean, simple, stupid, as lean, again, as simple as it gets. Once I logged into the system, voila, Ramona was able to help me get the exact look and feel that I wanted to with just a few menus. Clicking on the device list, I invoked an API call towards ISE, getting the list of switches and network access devices it has, and I'm showing it here. Once I show it, that's one nice thing. The second is I want to be able to filter it out. I want to search because I might have hundreds of switches. I want to search for a specific one, and I was asked by the customer, they wanted to have a visual representation of that device. Now, this specific functionality was not available at ISE. ISE can't draw this. So instead, what I did there, I used a Cisco open source tool, free of charge, called PyATS, in order to connect to that switch, gather that information, and create this and Ramona was able to create this beautiful representation of the switch. How does this work in the background? Remember front and back end, this is all nice and pretty. In the background, I have a container running this program, and when I click here, when I change the IP address of the device I'm trying to look at, what you'll see here, you'll recognize the command, I'm actually SSHing into that device, getting show interface status and a few more commands. I'm getting that information, parsing it in order to generate this view. So in this case, this is ISE and this is the switch. When I hover over the port, I can get some information about each one of the ports from that SSH information. So I know which endpoint I have behind each port, which ports have been authenticated, which port are not authenticated, ports that are up, ports that are down. All of that information I gather through SSH and send it over to the front end to be able to represent it. If I click a port, I wanted to dive deeper and get some more information. So I clicked a port. I know that there's a certain MAC address. It's authenticated with .1x. The username is called finance. I know the IP address. Here some echo. I know the IP address. I know the VLAN ID. I know the SGP. I have all of the information I can get from the switch about that specific endpoint. Now, so far so good. I'm doing all of the messy work in the background. What the user is seeing is very, very simple. Another functionality I wanted to have is the ability to search for a specific endpoint. Again, in the context of NAC, what could be is someone is calling me, I can't, and complaining about not being able to connect to the network. If they can't connect to the network, they obviously can't obtain an IP address. So I'm looking for their MAC address. Looking for the MAC address, I could have done it on ISE. I could have got these details, but here I'm just doing this exact same thing without all of the other menus. Now, so all of these functionalities, I'm fetching information from ISE, fetching information from the switches, but I'm not doing anything really new. The one thing I was told after getting to this part, my customer told me this is all great, wonderful. We have because you're able to do all of this, we have another request for you. We have a problem where at some point we'll get someone calling us, shouting at us. That person would always, it will be either a director, a VP, or a C-level person in the company complaining about they can't connect to the network and they have a WebEx call in 5 minutes. And at that point, what we'll do, and this, I'm sorry for the security people here, what we're going to do at that point, we're going to throw away all of the security policy, everything. We're going to add an exception to get our CEO on the network, regardless to whatever malware they have on the computer, and we'll get them in there. The problem with it is the fact that we as human beings are terrible with remembering things. And after that call is done, after the day is done, after a week is done, we will not remember to remove that exception. Maybe in a few years from now, someone will actually look at it and say, why is this here? If it's actually documented anywhere. And just to emphasize that, think about the following. Have any of you ever thought about removing a line of an access list configured on a network device? Yeah, you think about it, but does anyone has the guts to actually remove a line? Yeah, not unlikely. So we're terrible with remembering to do stuff. How can we address that using some coding skills? So I created a concept called a voucher, and just before that start, I created a concept called a voucher. A voucher is for me to give that exception, and again, for the security people, I know it's bypassing security, but we're going to do it anyway. What I wanted to do with this voucher is I wanted to create a bypass, which is time limited, and once the time is out, I want to remove that exception without anyone needing to remember to do that manually. So in order for that to work, what I needed to do is, first of all, I needed to create that exception rule. I need to have a rule in ISE saying I'm going to, again, throw all of the security away. So what I'm doing here in ISE, I needed to, first of all, create a policy, add the policy set, and create a rule that is an exception rule. So I'm adding a rule, and I created it. It's called voucher rule. I think I call it AEA. So yeah, voucher rule. I'm not sure if you're able to see the text, but I created a rule that says, if you're part of a certain endpoint group called vouchers, you bypass all security, I get you onto the network. Now, how do I get you onto that group? On vanilla ISE, sorry, I wanted to show first of all that group is right now empty. So AA vouchers, I don't have any MAC address in that group. Now, what I can do now on the vanilla ISE side, I can click add a voucher. I'm adding the MAC address of the relevant device. I have a duration, which I decided I wanted to have 2 hours, 8 hours, 48. You can decide on your own how much time. And then I need to choose whether it's a computer, a printer, or an IP phone, because that would set which VLAN is going to get on the network. Once I created that voucher, in the background, I made an API call adding that MAC address into the voucher group. What would happen next is either I click revoke or I wait for the expiration time to get here. That would automatically send another API call, removing that MAC address from the voucher group. As you can see, it's gone. So what I did here, again, I bypass security, but this time I'm bypassing only for a certain amount of time, and I don't need to worry about remembering to remove it. As a byproduct of the process, once we've done that, all of a sudden they say, okay, so this is interesting, but because I'm bypassing security, I'd like to have some audit trail of it. So one of the things we did, when I created the voucher, it mentioned who is the username that created that voucher, and in the background, that sent a syslog to the SIM system so that they can then have a log of who created the voucher when did the voucher expire, and then the security team felt a bit more comfortable just knowing that all of this is being audited. So again, this is about Cisco ISE and a specific flow and a specific requirements I had to handle. But all of the components I showed you, first of all, it's open source, available on GitHub. We do not have a web space. I will share all of the links, make all of the links available. If you'll search, Google search vanilla ISE, ISE, not you will get some results for the figure, but you will get to the GitHub repo. So if you search for vanilla ISE GitHub, you will get to the repo where all of the code is available. You can take this piece of code and you could modify it to your needs. So let's say it's not ISE. Let's say it's ACI, it's Catalyst Center, it's Meraki, it's Infoblox DNS, it's AWS, it's something completely different. You can tailor the backend to make the functionality invoking the APIs that you'd like, while the front end, you have the Cisco UI kit. You can change the menu items, you can play with the tables, you can check. I try to build it as modular as possible so you can understand which page, which part is in charge of each of the pages. You can alter it, change it, and make the UI that you would like for the system that you'd like. And at the end of the day, you'll be able, the idea is for you to offload some of the mundane work to someone that helped us, or someone that has the time, or someone that doesn't have the ability to provide value to the organization as you, as the expert, are able to do. With that, so you will have a list of all of the links to everything in the PDF that is supposed to be available already now in the Cisco Live app. We should have a WebEx space where we can continue the conversation. I have a few minutes. If anyone has a question, I can take it now. I would highly appreciate if you'll be able to fill in the survey. We live and by the surveys, and I'd love to understand what can I do better for the next time I present this. But with that, I would like to thank you very much for your time, and I can take a few questions if you have any. Or, yeah, code snippets if you'd like to. That's probably if you have time.
API.
Yes.
I'm assuming you get API to Cisco Catalyst Center too.
Yeah. So the question is, do we have?
Like the port nodes.
Yes. So the question is, do we have an API for Catalyst Center as well? Yes, it's available on developer.cisco.com. We can get that information and create that from Catalyst Center. The reason why I created it on my own, communicating directly with the switch, is that customer at the time did not have a Catalyst Center. And I wanted to create, if I'm already creating it, I wanted to make it as generic as possible. And I didn't want to assume my customer or the next customer has Catalyst Center. But yes, if you have Catalyst Center, you can do it with Catalyst Center as well. Yes. Sorry?
I don't think I can see the files, the slides.
Okay, so but the PDF is not on the WebEx, on the Cisco Live app yet. It will get there. It will be there. Wonderful. So yes.
So earlier you presented as a use case where you create an API call to provide the voucher. Any benefits to doing that in comparison with just creating a purging policy for every 24 hours, whatever you want?
Yeah. So the question is, I use the voucher concept with a timer based on the API call. The concept, can't I use a purging policy on ISE itself to create that? So first of all, yes, I can. The problem I had with purging is the fact that purging would occur let's say, every day at midnight, or every 2 days at midnight. And if I want to create just 2 hours, or I want to have 48 hours, or I want to have something dynamic based on when the voucher started ticking, purging won't allow me to have that. So I have more granularity doing that, and a purging policy is relevant. If I have a purging policy, how do I get that MAC address into the device device group, endpoint group? Someone needs to use it on ISE, and the whole idea is for me to give the help desk a simple UI where they don't need to log into ISE. So that's discussion.
So if you can get it into the endpoint group, you can purge that endpoint group.
That's exactly what I've been doing. When you create a voucher, I'm adding a MAC address to the endpoint group. When the voucher is revoked or it expires, it removes that entry from the voucher project. Great. If anyone has any more questions, feeling a bit shy, I'll be here a few more minutes. And if not, enjoy the rest of Cisco Live. And thank you very much. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you. Yes.
Is the code still maintained?